Congressman King, thanks for joining us today.
I'm happy to be with you, Tim.
Listen, I want to talk to you about, there's so much that's going on in the world that's outside of congressional hearings right now. Terrorism, number one. London's been attacked now twice in the past month. What does that mean for America? How does that translate for us? And what should we be worried about?
Well, I think if you look at as much as they have done to bring in migration out of those parts of the world from which emanates terrorism, that it can be homegrown, it can be imported, but it does come out of that part of the world. And I'm talking about Middle Eastern, and for them it goes usually Pakistani as much of the UK. And I think they have to look at that. If you don't control your borders, if you don't control who's coming into your country, then you're accepting the demographics that you're importing. And we all know by now, demographics are destiny.
Well, one of the and this is going to get to exactly what I want to talk to you about today, one of the major comments that we get on our shows all the time, build the wall. And like, it's not even prompted. People just put build the wall in our comments on the show. Where are we with that?
Well, I don't think the project's moving along quickly enough to, certainly not to satisfy me. And the president had, this is a mandate from the American people. I mean, they chanted build the wall at many, many stops. You could almost say virtually every stop. And yet now I'm hearing discussion about a virtual wall. The American people, when you say wall, you don't get to reinterpret that into virtual anything or high-tech anything. A wall is a wall. And it really isn't even a wall that doesn't include a fence. It's not a fence. It's not virtual anything. It's a structural concrete wall that is hard to jump over and difficult to dig under and impossible to run through. And that's what we need to build. It's the cheapest component of it. We can build a structural concrete wall. Precast panels is what I would say, and I would slip form that foundation. They're looking at the designs now, and that's good. They've put out requests for proposals, but a wall is a wall, and the American people are not going to accept a virtual anything or a high-tech anything. But if you want virtual and high-tech, you add that to the wall, not detract from it. And I think the American people will be very disappointed if we don't get this done. The request that the president has in his budget is $1.6 billion. I'd have rather seen $5 to $6 billion rather than 1.6. Then I would have known that he's committed to building 2,000 miles of structural concrete wall. And I'd like to remind the American people that of all of the detractors that are there, they'll say, now, border crossings are down 70%, so we don't need the wall. Well, how did this happen? It's because the message is out that we're enforcing the law. But the return on the investment for a wall will absolutely pay for itself many, many times over. And that wall, it would not only be a monument to the Trump administration. What it really is a monument to the rule of law. And if you're going to be a first world country, you've got to have the rule of law. That's the big difference between us and the countries south of where that wall hopefully will be.
And it's interesting that you bring up the rule of law, because the term for undocumented immigrants used to be illegal alien. We're not allowed to say that. Apparently that's now not PC to say anymore, but the word was right there for so long. Do you have any opinion on that? I mean, it literally said illegal in the statement when we would reference people coming across the border illegally. How do we lose that?
Well, one of the things that I've been roundly criticized for is using accurate and descriptive language so that people can shape images in their mind and understand what I'm talking about. And so I have been descriptive about this. It's an Irish characteristic, by the way, to use superlatives and hyperbole in order to get your point across. So I get my culture and my language if they're going to have theirs. But I recall a conversation had 4 or 5 senators, 4 or 5 House members at a meeting in January or February of 2013. First time I met Ted Cruz face to face. And he'd made a comment in that meeting that we have to be very careful with our language, because the left will use that against us. And so we need to be cautious. And I listened to that. He was right. But I made the point that whatever language we use that is effective, they will characterize it as offensive. And so we can't let them dictate to us what language we can't use. Illegal alien is a proper legal term. You'll find it in the federal code, and it's a proper term. And people that are lawbreakers don't want to be called lawbreakers. People that are criminals don't want to be called criminals. People that are felons don't want to be called felons. And we need to be precise on that. And whatever we do, we cannot be rewarding people for breaking the law. It's about, for me, for years, since Ronald Reagan signed the Amnesty Act in 1986, it's been an effort on my part to restore the respect for the rule of law. And now I'm hearing people say, well, can't we grant some kind of a waiver? Can't we let at least some of the DACA people, those that have the most merit, can't we let them be legalized in some form? And my answer to that is, we can't simultaneously restore the rule of law, restore the respect for the rule of law, and then grant amnesty to any segment of people that have violated it. If you do that, they're contradictory moves, and you'll never get this resolved. We've got to restore the respect for the rule of law by enforcing the law in all circumstances. And wouldn't you rather have people that have not broken the law come to America in a legal way and embrace and welcome them? And there's nothing that disallows DACA or DAPA or any of the other beneficiaries of Barack Obama's unconstitutional amnesty acts, nothing that keeps them from going back to their home country. And I don't want to ask them if they get back in the back of the line and apply. I don't want to ask them, did you ever live in America? Although that is on the questionnaire. If they can slip by that piece of it and come back into the United States legally, it's a long line back there. There are at least 5 million people that are legally waiting to come into America. And we've got, what is our number, 11 million illegals in America? I don't believe that number. It was 12 million when I came to this town 14 years ago. Now it's 11. That number has to grow, not shrink, and I think it's been redefined.
So do you think then the term politically correct means politically correct for the left?
Oh, sure. Yeah, and the double standard is just, it's unbelievable how stark that double standard is on politically correct language. And in fact, it's become clear that some people, if they're on the left, they get by with using terms, like Bill Maher, for one thing. He gets by with using terms because he's from the left. But if anybody on the right said such a thing, they would be ostracized completely from the public arena. And so I'm constantly facing that particular judgment. And by the way, if you watch too, the politically correct police are always analyzing the psyche of anybody that they disagree with politically, and they just freely put labels on conservatives as if somehow they were the psychoanalyst instantaneously. And I said to them, if you're a minority or if you're a leftist, does that give you the moral authority to pass judgment on somebody you disagree with and hurl those accusations? And of course, they don't have a very good answer for that. They are not multicultural.
Yeah. I know my time's coming at some point here. They're going to get me for something at some point.
You're not doing your job if they don't.
Once our viewership went above 100,000 an episode, I knew I'm just waiting for it to come. Anyway.
If you're effective, they will target you.
It's the worst, right? It's the shame on you for doing a good job. I wanted to end today by talking to you about something that's been kind of fun for us. You get confused a lot with people. I'm Tim Young. It's a very generic name. Steve King is a little bit more specific of a name, but you've been confused with, let's see, an ambassador to the Czech Republic, Peter King as well, and then also occasionally the author. How do you deal with that when that happens?
Well, mostly in Peter King's case, it's mostly a problem he has to deal with rather than me. But it's most often people, well, it actually goes both ways. People will confuse the two of us, and I'll get blamed for some of the things Peter King says, and he gets blamed for some of the things that I say. And we just more or less make a joke about it and roll with the punches. Stephen King, the author, up in Maine, he has a longer reach than people might realize. I mean, I might walk through an airport, hand him my identification, and have him look up and say, "Writing any books lately?" Not that often do they say, "Oh, Congressman, do you happen to know the author?" And we've not met. Now, the ambassador to the Czech Republic. This was actually probably the funniest confusion of names that I remember. But in any case, a day here a couple of weeks ago or so, my text started to light up, my email started to light up with requests from the press. And what were my comments on being named as the next ambassador to the Czech Republic? And I knew nothing about it, but given the Trump administration, you can't be sure that they just didn't decide to name me as the ambassador to the Czech Republic, and I could find out about that in the paper the next morning.
That'd be a fun present.
Well, it would have been an interesting discussion. In fact, my wife was sending me texts saying, "Are you the next ambassador to the Czech Republic?" and so that's so I couldn't answer the question right away because I didn't know. And it took me 2 or 3 hours, and by then, things that happened, like a text came from Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan. And he said, "Congratulations, Ambassador," in his text to me. But he knew the joke, because the Steve King that was named as Ambassador of the Czech Republic is Paul Ryan's campaign chairman. And to tie this together, sometime around Christmas time, this past Christmas, I got a phone call from Speaker Ryan. It was on a Sunday, as I recall. And he said, "Hey, Steve, is that you over there across the arena?" And I don't think so. And he said, "Why?" And I'm trying to figure out, is this a hoax call or something? But it was his number that showed up on my phone. And it turned out that Paul Ryan was with a couple of friends at a hockey game, and he looked across the other side of the arena and thought he recognized Steve King, picked up his phone, hit the speed dial, and he got me instead of the Steve King as campaign chairman, and was talking to me as if he was looking at me across the arena. And we had a big laugh out of that. So twice the Speaker of the House has been I'll just say, caught up in this mixed up name situation between the two of us. Neither have I met the Stephen King who is the author, nor the Steve King who is the future, confirmed, I hope, ambassador to the Czech Republic, but now I'll know where to find him.
And what we'll do is in the comments section, while people are watching, we're going to put a meme up of the three of you so that there's a graphic so that people can easily identify the key to Steve King. So we're going to put that up there.
And you know, you didn't even go into the confusion we used to have here with Tom Tancredo. He was my lookalike in Congress. And the confusions that came out of the lookalikes were about the same build, and we've had similar facial features, but there was a constant confusion going on. And there's nothing salacious about it, but it's actually true that both Tom Tancredo's wife Jackie and my wife Marilyn had confused us for each other. No. And so that's always been a funny joke. And then there was also a house page named Audrey that would always bring me the memos from the press that would be for Tom, and she'd be bringing mine to Tom Tancredo. So finally one day, when she brought me Tom Tancredo's ticket memo for 10th or 12th time, I put my hands on her shoulders and I said, "Audrey, gaze deeply into my eyes. If they're blue, it's King. If they're brown, it's Tancredo." And she just about melted on that one. But we took her out on the steps of the Capitol on April Fool's Day and had her picture taken with Tom on one side and me on the other. She was a neat young lady.
Do you guys have that picture somewhere? We'd love to see it if you have it.
I don't know if we can find that or not. It would be, I'd have to go back and check the date. April Fool's Day, probably one of the last 2 years that Tom Tancredo was in Congress. It's possible we could find it. It'd take some real digging, though.
Don't worry about it. You have real work to do. Thank you so much for being on the show, and thanks for everything that you do.
Well, it's fun to do, and I'm happy to do this interview with you, Tim. And not only that, we've got a country to save. We can do it with good humor. We can serve with joy, and that's what I get to do. And there's a lot of criticism out there, but I think the public needs to know that there are serious people in this town that believe in the Constitution, God, country, in that order, the rule of law, and we want to restore the pillars of American exceptionalism. That's what I'm working on. That's what a lot of my colleagues are working on, and it's a great privilege to be in a position to be able to make a difference and move the country in the right direction.
Thank you so much, Congressman Peter King. Just kidding.
And you're Tim.
Thanks so much.